Hey, everybody. Welcome. It's Elizabeth Cronice McLaughlin. It's the 15th of November, 2019. Wow. Has today been a day? I'll give you all a few minutes to kind of log in here. And I want to appreciate your patience for letting us delay while Yovanovitch was getting through the bulk of her testimony. Of course, her testimony is still ongoing right now. But it's been a heck of a day today. Quite the day indeed. So we have a fair amount to talk about on a number of fronts. And, what's pretty crazy is that, the days, of course, it's Friday in Trumpland. The day is not yet done. There's an additional deposition coming up this afternoon for the aide to Ambassador Taylor, who was cited in Wednesday's testimony as having overheard the conversation between Sondland and Trump. We have additional witnesses coming up next week. So there's an awful lot ongoing today on the front of national politics. It's just absolutely crazy at this stage of the game that this is where we find ourselves. But on the whole, it's a very good day in general. And I personally am feeling pretty optimistic about where we find ourselves. My sense at this moment is that we're in pretty good shape. And, fundamentally, I think the long and the short of it is that we've got some very solid evidence in front of us right now from the standpoint of where we find ourselves. So let's just talk for a couple minutes about where we are. Oh, my computer looks like it's frozen. Hopefully it's not. All right. So let's just talk through a couple of breaking things right now about where we find ourselves. And all of them, I want to remind you all, are pretty significant. So we do have former Ambassador Yovanovitch testifying live right now. Her testimony from where we sit has been incredibly compelling. My view of where we find ourselves right now with regard to her is largely positive, although I will say that I one of the things that's been incredibly difficult about watching this since the very earliest hours of this morning here on the West Coast is that she is at this stage of the game kind of on the edge of emotion all the time. And, one of the things that I just want to acknowledge here is that this woman has been put through hell, lifelong service to our government, decades of service as an ambassador. And Trump took her apart to make an example of what he would do to people who got in his way. And, I think all of us have sort of been watching this feeling like there is just there's a profound amount of grief in addition to the fact that obviously she's an American hero. When I said to my kids this morning, like, this is what a superhero looks like, I meant it, because she's telling the truth and she's standing up to power and she's doing just an incredible job of it. So, the testimony is really compelling at this moment in time. And I hope you're all sort of recognizing that part of what's happening here is that we're seeing a career public servant who has served under both Democratic and Republican administrations really standing up for the rule of law and standing up for the truth. And we need more of that. I just want to honor her, the dignity that she brings to this role, the dignity that she's brought to today, the obvious suffering that she's been put through at the hands of this president and his people. The lack of defense that our Department of State has given her under Pompeo is appalling. The story of her State Department colleagues reaching out to try to get a statement of support from Pompeo and him refusing to give it because he was afraid of the president tweeting. It's an astonishing day in American history. We need to not also discount the fact that the president committed witness tampering in real time today while she was testifying. He issued a tweet slamming her, claiming that, conditions in Mogadishu were her fault while she was there. Conditions in Ukraine had declined under her, neither of which is true, of course. She was asked about that in real time by Adam Schiff. And, one of the things that is so disturbing about that is that it was obviously designed to intimidate her and to intimidate future witnesses from coming forward. In and of itself, what the president did this morning is a separate impeachable offense. And that's, it's, there's nothing that will stop him. I mean, this is like, I guess this is kind of like the prime example of this, but there's literally nothing that's going to stop this president until he's removed. And, the GOP watching this in real time knows it. I'll just say, like, Lynn Cheney, oh my God, who, 100% of the time I absolutely can't stand, made a statement this morning that she was profoundly disturbed by the president's statement about Yovanovitch while she was testifying under oath. One of the things that is interesting here about what's happening in the GOP is there's starting to be a sort of schism that's developing between the old school conservatives, all of whom I disagree with. Please don't take any of this as an endorsement. And the sort of Tea Party Trump sycophants, right? Where there is an acknowledgement in the more traditional conservatives of this public service that is being provided by these lifelong diplomats, right? The fact that these are people who give their lives day in and day out, that their families are a part of their service. They are stationed in places, as Yovanovitch pointed out this morning, that are often quite dangerous. She was at the front lines in a hot war between Russia and Ukraine while she was there. These are not easy positions and not easy roles. And there are people in the traditional conservative wing of the GOP who recognize that these are patriots, right? And then we also, on the other side of it, have all these crazy cult members in Trump cults, cult Trump, who are out there slamming these people who have given their entire lives in dedication to the service of this country. So that's also just an interesting thing from a strategic standpoint on impeachment and going forward is that, if people like Lynn Cheney are upset with the president, that says something about the cracks that are happening inside the GOP as we speak. So there's a lot going on at this moment in time from that standpoint as well. I'll also just add Fox News, Bret Baier, not somebody who usually speaks out against the president, mentioned in real time on Fox this morning that the president had committed another arguably impeachable act by tweeting at Yovanovitch while she was testifying. There again, we can all be cynical and bitter about it if we would care to, but let me just say this. There are edges right now that are happening here that are worth paying attention to because they're signs of the strain that the GOP is under in light of the president's conduct and the serious, grave nature of the testimony from these career public servants, these honorable public servants before this committee. So really incredible day, just an incredible day. I mean, I was thinking about it this morning at one point and about Rachel Maddow's broadcast Bagman, that podcast that she did earlier in the year, about Spiro Agnew and the fact that like 50 years from now, somebody's going to be doing a podcast about what happened this day or something, whatever the broadcast is at that point. Like it's that significant. It's one of those, today is one of those days that they're going to write about in the history books because what is happening is so profoundly powerful and so profoundly significant to the future of American democracy. Bunch of you have asked questions about Steve Castor, who was asking questions of Yovanovitch. He's not doing a good job. I just want to make this really clear. Like Dan Goldman is knocking it out of the park for the Democrats. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Democrat. I'm saying it from the standpoint of having been a career litigator. His questions are very thorough. They are leading questions, which he is allowed to make in this instant. Dan Goldman has been getting, all the right answers and evidence out in front of the public from Yovanovitch. Castor, yes, he has a shitty case. I want to make this really clear. There's no defense to what the president has done at this stage of the game that is going to make any sense from a legal standpoint. So it's not like he's been handed the best facts in the world in order to make a case. But his questioning actually, in many instances, led to results that supported the Democrats. And he did some things that you're never supposed to do when you're questioning an adverse witness. Like he asked open-ended questions rather than yes or no questions that would lead to the answer that he was seeking. Yovanovitch had a great platform while Castor was asking questions to talk through why corruption is so damaging to governments and to democracy. It's kind of a strange little thing, just a kind of a very strange little thing. And I'm not sure what's going on there. I mean, it may just very well be that he's either not a very skilled lawyer or that he's just been given a crap case and that's what he did with it. But I mean, this is the best the Republicans can get. They're not in great shape. We've seen Schiff also do some very astute, careful questioning here. And once again, what the Republicans are doing is theatrics, right? Like Devin Nunes tried to get Elise Stefanik to be able to talk against the rules that were agreed to in the resolution and passed by the House. This is just drama, right? I'll also just point out that it is not unintentional that the GOP has put Stefanik up in this position as the only GOP woman on the committee. They are plainly trying to set up this drama of Schiff silencing a woman. It's already up on the front page of Fox News that she's being gagged by the Democrats. I've said a lot about this on Twitter this morning. She's being tokenized by the GOP. She's being used by the GOP willingly in furtherance of their, white supremacist patriarchal agenda. So I hope she's proud, from where we sit right now, they're not scoring any points. Like that's the other thing I just want to make really clear. They're not scoring any points at this moment in time with what they're doing. All they have to point to is like this false claim, what everybody knows to be a false claim that somehow Adam Schiff met with the whistleblower. He literally said yesterday, and there's no dispute on this, he doesn't know the identity of the whistleblower. He's never met with the whistleblower. So they're, again, I just want to reiterate, like they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. It's not like there's really any like legal objective facts or argument or position here that is successful at this moment in time for the Republicans. So it's all pretty crazy. I want to say one word of warning before we go on to the other really big news of the day, which is this. I'm getting more and more questions from a bunch of you who follow here on Patreon and on Twitter and elsewhere that are to the effect of like, this person over here says this. What do you think about that? So I just want to remind all of you that, there's a lot of armchair philosophers right now. And because of the heightened environment that we're in, like everybody has an opinion. Just please know this, okay? Like and again, I just want to remind you all of this. Like there are things to be grounded in reality right now. And then there are things that you can kind of just dismiss and ignore, right? Like we had this question this morning that's like, Trump will never be impeached because the GOP is taking corporate money. Okay. So can I just remind you all of something here, right? Like, the Constitution requires the impeachment of the president for bribery, treason, high crimes, and misdemeanors. It is a huge problem that there is corporate and dark money in politics right now. We've seen that with regard to the NRA. We've seen it with regard to the breaking news that we had just last night on Pete Sessions getting a massive I can't even go. It's like crazy, right? Like, so the other bit of breaking news, which we're going to talk about a little bit because it relates today, but let me just throw this in here. There was breaking news this morning in the Wall Street Journal that Rudy Giuliani is under investigation for trying to personally benefit from this liquid natural gas deal in Ukraine. By the way, which is also one of the things that Parnas and Furman are implicated in. Pete Sessions is the former congressman in Texas who is implicated in trying to further parts of this scheme with regard to Ukraine. He also, by the way, has apparently taken money, an enormous amount of money, like $3 million from Parnas as a result of all of this. And that was kind of like breaking last night. Like the long and the short of it is like, yes, money in politics is a huge problem. Dark money in politics is a huge problem. This is one of the reasons why people like Elizabeth Warren are only taking money from people like you and me, right? Like, average American citizens. The key thing I want to point out to you here is that participatory democracy requires your participation, as you all know I've been saying, and there's not a single thing that's going to stop the train of impeachment as long as we're loud enough and the GOP is convinced to crack. So like the fact that there's dark money in politics is not something that is going to prevent the impeachment of this president, assuming that the right leverage points are pressed. So I just want to I want to make something very clear here. Like, it is incredibly important to take everything that you read with, an understanding that it is the opinion of one person. That, by the way, also goes for me. I mean, yes, I'm in line with most of the great legal minds out there at the moment about all of this. And yes, I may have a certain degree of experience with this sort of stuff that the average human doesn't. But I'm just one person, right? And it's really important to me that as all of you read things, particularly if they're anonymous, right? Particularly if they're from like Twitter threads where you don't have a picture and you don't know who the person is and you can't vet them and they're just some rando out there, that you don't use that as a reason to kind of spin off into nothingness, right? Like, take the word of people who you have vetted. Take the word of people who know what they're talking about. Take the word of people who know the law, right? Who understand the law. Maybe people who have had some type of responsibility on Capitol Hill or who have worked with people who have responsibility on Capitol Hill, right? Like, I mean, you can't take literally every opinion that is out there right now as a reason to go off on a tangent. This is all stressful enough without there being any reason to kind of like make it more dramatic than it actually is. Okay. So let's talk about Roger Stone, because I know that's the other thing that all of you want to kind of talk about. So Roger Stone was convicted this morning on all 7 counts. I just want to point something out. One of the counts that Roger Stone was convicted on was witness tampering, which, by the way, the president did in real time, as we've already discussed this morning. And he's going to be sentenced in February. The sentencing date has been set for February 6th. For those of you who are wondering why it takes so long, it is because under the federal rules, there are requirements for sentencing statements to be filed by both the prosecution and the defense when someone is convicted. Now, I personally am very disappointed that Judge Jackson did not immediately stick him in the clink. She allowed him to be released on the conditions of his bail. However, there are indications that once again, he has broken the gag order that is in place in that case. And my suspicion is that if he breaks it again, he'll be in jail for good. He is facing up to 50 years of imprisonment. I will remind you, he is not a young man. He also, by the way, is incredibly well networked with Trump. One of the articles that I reposted this morning on The Twitter feed concerns the fact that, Roger Stone has been advising Donald Trump for so long, it's hard to tell where Roger Stone ends and Donald Trump begins. The president, of course, in real time flipped out about the conviction of Roger Stone and once again kind of threatened to jail his opponents in the same tweet. All of it is, it's great that he was convicted. Like, I don't, I don't want to say that I did anything other than like leap off my couch in celebration, because I did. He belongs in jail for a very long time. Now, one of the pending questions is whether or not Stone is going to be pardoned. I was asked this question on Twitter this morning, and I'm just going to say that like the tangent of my head on all of this was whether or not Trump pardoning Roger Stone in this instance could arguably be considered to be an abuse of power warranting another article of impeachment. The pardon power is granted to the president in the Constitution sort of unilaterally. It's a good question, however, in my mind, whether if you abuse that power, and we've already seen the president being willing to pardon people without going through the usual channels of pardon vetting that have become customary, right? You'll all remember if you were watching back when he pardoned Arpaio, that there were concerns then about it not having been vetted through the DOJ Office of Pardons. He has not used that office at all in the time that he's been in office. Query whether if you pardon somebody who's wrapped up in a scheme that concerns your own manipulation of a presidential election, that in and of itself might make up an article of impeachment. I mean, I can see it as a possibility. Let's put it that way. Again, remember, the presidents can be impeached for things that aren't technically crimes, right? So it's kind of an interesting question, frankly. I will tell you, however, that I think that from the standpoint of things like consciousness of guilt, intent, right? Maybe even conspiracy, that if he pardons Roger Stone, there's going to be some very serious potential liabilities in front of him that relate to the things of which he's already accused. So I don't know. Again, we'll have to wait and see on that. I'll tell you, if I was a betting woman, which occasionally I am, I would bet that he's not going to pardon Roger Stone, because the optics of it will be so bad for him. From the standpoint of his own impeachment, which honestly at this moment seems to be the only thing that he cares about, that he might be convinced to save some face, and again, narcissist, cares very much about what other people think about him. He might be convinced to save some face by not pardoning Roger Stone. But who knows? We'll see. Anyway, very interesting day for democracy. Yovanovitch is not yet done. I want all of you to just not worry about this attempt that the Republicans are making, by the way, to introduce all these news articles. That in and of itself is another just attempted distraction away from what we're doing here. Really, if I had any bit of advice to give all of you at this moment in time, heading into next week and after the week that we've had here, it's this. Stay focused, okay? Stay focused on what is actually happening, because the only thing that really matters here is that the president is accused of bribery, extortion, abuse of power, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, in various ways. And the only defense to those crimes that will carry any weight in a court of law or in front of the Senate is evidence that exculpates him, meaning evidence that shows that he's not guilty. Like something that, for instance, said, he released a new transcript this morning, which, by the way, was a transcript of a call before Biden even announced. There's a lot more that we could say about that, but it's kind of a no-brainer. He did it to distract. But the real key here is that there is no evidence that exculpates the president. There is no evidence. Literally, it's not even like he could, fabricate. There's no evidence. There's no evidence that he didn't do it. Right? All the evidence that there actually is, the testimony, the documents, the transcript, the witnesses, the course of conduct, the pattern and practice, right? Everything that we have heard now from dozens of not dozens, but a dozen witnesses at this point, with more to come, is that he did it. He's dead to rights on it. It's cut and dried. So the only thing that would be there is if there was if there was evidence that he didn't do it, right? And that evidence is not, don't call it a quid pro quo, even when it is. That evidence would have to be something like he didn't do it. So that's the thing to stay focused on. Not all this other random shit that the Republicans are throwing at the wall, not the kitchen sink that they're waiting to see if it sticks, not the procedural bullshit, right? Stay focused on what really matters here. What really matters is that there's evidence that the president's a criminal, and it's evidence that's admissible in a court of law. Everybody else's theories, Stay focused. That's my best advice right now. I know it's really hard under this degree of stress. Like so many of us are struggling. Like I said on Twitter last night, I sleep through the night like maybe one night every 3 right now. Like we're all in this together, right? I get that it's very difficult, but I think the more we stay focused, the better it's going to be. All right. That's it for today. I'm going live over on Facebook for the weekly broadcast very shortly, which is, the weekly roundup if you want to watch it. Thanks as always to all of you who support here on Patreon. Super duper grateful for you. We are going to try to get a bonus video for our folks at $10 and up very shortly, which is going to be hopefully on survival strategies and the like. And I will talk to all of you next week. But in the meantime, please make sure that you are continuing to call the moderate senators that we've been calling for leverage, for pinging, for your activism, as often as you would care to. All right. Much love to all of you. Enjoy the weekend. Get some time to relax, please, because God knows we all need it. All right. Bye.